Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the African Exodus show. I'm your host, Tierney Cherie. Before I get started with this segment today, I do want to remind you all, if you have not yet, please do subscribe to my Telegram channel. That is where I update with videos. If you don't get a notification from YouTube, you'll get a notification from me when a video is going live. So that is a way to stay connected outside of YouTube. So everyone, I want to talk about an important issue, particularly for us, the children of Yah, the African diaspora, people who are scattered, the children of Israel, children of Yisrael, the children who are scattered over and abroad, those of us who are living inside of Babylon. I want to talk about this in a way that is going to be constructive and not a way that is going to be talking down on anyone or saying, hey guys, I'm already over here, you should be doing the same thing. We're going to have a conversation about our options. That's what we should be thinking about with what's going on in the world system. What are our options as a people? So first, let's just talk about the situation. The situation is that America is on a decline, but it's not just on a decline as far as politics. It's on a decline morally. You see what's happening. You see what's being pushed on our children. You see how the society has gone bankrupt. You see the lack of compassion, the lack of empathy. So it's on a decline in that way. But as we said, it's also on a decline politically. Now, what's America going to look like whenever it's no longer a superpower? Because that's going to happen. We don't know. We don't know if it's going to be a completely desolate land and if it's going to be complete anarchy. I can tell you for sure that as far as the Make America Great Again people, they are prepared for the anarchy. That's what they have been foreseeing. But we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. We do know, however, that because this country is such a pinnacle of the Babylonian system, and it's the largest military in the world, it's the largest economy in the world, it's the largest prison industrial complex, it's the largest on so many fronts. We do know because of that America is the Babylonian system, and as such, it will fall. So putting that out there, laying a foundation, there's an issue for those of us who are in America, or if you're inside of different European countries, or if you're entrenched inside of that system, because understand, even in Africa, you could be entrenched inside of the American world order, the American-led world order. So this is a problem for all of us to think about who are entrenched inside of that system. How do we separate? What is the best means to do so? Can we do it immediately? Should we do it immediately? Or should we take our time and figure something out? Those are the things we're going to talk about. What I want to ask you is very simply, are you able to protect yourself from the world global system and what's going to happen very soon? Are you able to protect your family where you are, or do you need to relocate? So that is a basic question to ask yourself. Look at your surroundings. Look at what happened with COVID-19. I said before, COVID-19 was a warning shot. This is where the system's going. If you thought the shutdown and the mandates, if you thought that was something that was just coming and going, no, it was only a testing ground for what's going to happen next. So look at your situation. Are you in a better position to exercise your autonomy, to exercise separation from the system based on where you are, or do you have to leave? And sometimes there's more immediate things you can do. You don't necessarily have to do the most drastic thing up front. The more immediate thing could be maybe leaving the city to the suburbs, leaving the city for the country, leaving the north to go down south. Those could be things to do in the here and now. And of course, there's a reality that many of us are limited because of our situation. Like literally our brothers and sisters who are caught up in a prison industrial complex, they might not be able to do such things. So these are things we're going to talk about and just give you some food for thought. Let's start with the scriptures that whereby we're told to be separate from this system. So again, these will probably be scriptures I'll read from often. 1 Peter 2:9, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. There's a nation component of this. A people for Yah's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. And if you feel like the system that you're a part of now is darkness, he's calling you out of that into his marvelous light. Revelations 18:4, saying, I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, so that you will not participate in her sins and receive any of her plagues. her being Babylon. We're told that Babylon is not just a spiritual system, it's also an economic system, it's also a political system. It's a number of systems merged into one. I highly recommend, if you want a very vivid picture painted to you as far as what Babylon is, listen to the Bob Marley song, Babylon System. And 2 Corinthians 6:17, therefore come out from their midst and be separate, says Yahuwah, and do not touch what is unclean, and I will welcome you. So again, you're not supposed to be with the masses. You're supposed to be from out of the masses in a separate people. Now, are you able to do these things? Are you able to follow these mandates easily, or is it really a struggle to do it based on where you are? These are all individual questions for you to ask yourself. So let's talk about the different options. Now, I firmly believe that there's going to be a point where America is not even a place where you would want to live. That's just my personal opinion, because not just about the component of the system crashing, but your position as an African child of Yah. If you are a person that's inside of these borders, I think that there's going to be a point where anarchy breaks out, and many of the people who have a hatred of you are going to go after you. That is my honest belief. So you have to think about, number one, if that happens, if this place becomes so volatile, am I in a position to where I could protect myself? And that comes with obviously having something like the right to bear arms, having the ability to organize within your community, doing those things that are of the legacy of our people. Are you in that position, or are you basically a sitting duck that's waiting for whoever to come and use you at their whim? That's another question for you to ask yourself. Now, if you have to move to be inside of a position where you can actually exercise, for example, your right to bear arms, and also exercise things like use of the land, being able to grow your own food. That's something that you have to seriously think about, being able to grow your own food and live self-sufficiently. If you do have to do that and do have to basically reorganize your life based on that, how long will it take you to do it? This is a practical question, because don't think that things stop because we have to take our time. If you have a 20-year plan, is the timer going to run out on you to do what you need to do to be able to resist the system? Of course, I don't know. None of us know the day or the time when these things are going to really manifest. I have warned, though, that a lot of things are being said about the year 2030 as far as what the elites are planning, as far as what you hear with these smart cities, what you hear as far as different things with the World Economic Forum. They plan on having their initiatives in place by 2030. So that year is significant to the people who I would identify as being portions of the Illuminati, the portions that we see. So if that date is significant to them, that date should be something that you at least pay attention to and try to know that this is a time when they are planning something big. But I don't know when these things are going to happen, and you don't know when these things are going to happen. Realistically, this thing could catch us all off guard and happen next week. But if you are not in a position to live off the land, to take care of yourself, to get yourself separate like you need to be, how long is it going to take for you to get there? Knowing that things are not going to wait for any of us, how long will it take you to get there? So one thing I am going to start doing, and I'll break it down more probably towards the end of the video, is trying to just show some practical steps that I'm actively trying to take to get there, because I'm not there. Okay, let me be very clear. You say, yeah, I'm in Africa. I think I'm in a better position than I was in the US to resist the system. Let me be very clear about that. But am I separate from the system to a point where I can honestly say that if the system comes down on me, I'm going to be able to resist them better than the average person? I'm not there yet. So we're going to start talking about some practical steps that can be taken, that I'm taking. Education is the number one step. You have to educate yourself. You have to know how to grow your own food. If you don't know how to grow your own food, already you're off the list. And that's something that I'm learning. But you have to just have knowledge. You have to have knowledge of how to make things, of how to do things for survival. So that's something we're going to get into more. So let's say that you are living in Babylon. Are you going to be ready to go when Yah calls you out of her in a physical sense? And I don't know what way that's going to happen. No one knows. But I do truly believe that your ability to be separate will be drastically increased based on if you are not living in the West. Because while you can be in Africa and really fall off the map if you want to, I mean, just get rid of your cell phone, number one, because know that they're tracking all of us with their cell phones, with their technology, know that. But if you want to leave it behind, you can probably fall off the map. Are you going to be able to do that everywhere? Are you going to be able to do that in Europe? It's going to be harder. It's going to be harder to fall off the map because, frankly, they have cameras everywhere, cameras that are working. You know, that's the other thing. Electricity is more easily accessible. Whenever they start instituting this facial ID system, which we know is coming, as is already inside of certain parts of China, where your face is literally can be picked up from any place, are you going to be able to fall off the map if you want to? I think highly not. So these are the reasons why living inside of the Babylonian system is going to be more difficult. I also think that if you're not receiving from the system, it probably is not even worth it probably to you personally, meaning like if you're not receiving economic support, if you're not receiving like some type of substantive thing from the system on an ongoing basis. So for example, if you have a really great job, but that job's no longer available to you because of your religious stance, then you might just not even want to be there, period. So that's another thing to think, you know, if that job, that the cord is cut on that job, are you going to be in a position to put yourself in a place to where you can take care of yourself? Now, some other things that I want to get into, though, as far as going to Africa, you're not going to Africa to escape the end times. Let me be very clear about that. That's not my stance. That's not something that I'm trying to put out there. You're not going to escape the end times. This is the Holy Land. This is the Holy of Holies that have broken down. So this is a place where you will be extended, I believe, a certain protection. But understand, the world system, we're told in Scripture, is all going to fall to the beast system. So while you're not as ingrained in the system and not as controlled by the system, the whole world system will fall to the beast system. But as I said, as far as Africa, this land, this is, you know, the land that has a certain grace on it. I believe there's an absolute reason why, for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, that you didn't see the same things being done as far as the measures, as far as remember Tanzania's president, name's forgiving me is escaping me right now, so please forgive me. But the president of Tanzania, who passed away, who took a real hard stance. Like, you're not going to see that in the West. You're not going to see that at all. You're not going to see the same grace being extended as far as you've seen. The underdeveloped world was the place to be if you did not want to be subject to the worst effects of the pandemic. If you wanted to be in that position, then the underdeveloped world was actually where you wanted to be. Our African people in the Western world had worse health effects, worse health outcomes inside of the West during the COVID-19 pandemic than you did if you were inside of the African continent. And why is that? Because you have to understand, certain things are designed to kill you, even if it doesn't kill you quickly. And one of those things is racism. Racism is designed to kill you long term. It's designed to put pollutants inside of your environment. It's designed to give you food that's not good for you. It's designed to crush you in a way that cannot be done by any other means. And that's what happened to a lot of our people. Just being in the system, we faced way worse prospects. Just being amongst the entrenched wickedness of the system put us in a position where we were unfortunately ones that died the most. And those are things you have to, I mean, what is your explanation, honestly? How is it that we inside of a developed world, but us African people were dying far, far worse inside of the West than we were if we lived inside of the African continent, if we lived inside of the Caribbean or Latin America? Latin America was also really bad for people. But if you're living inside of the African continent, what was the reason? Think about how hard it is to be in the system and not lose your morals, because that's a requirement of staying in Babylon. Understand, that was always a requirement of Babylon. Babylon's not new, obviously. Babylon goes back to ancient Babylon. That was always a requirement, to bow down to the Baal worship. Think about how that is a requirement now in order to work, in order to see your kids. You know, you read about how even parents who are just taking stances can't even have custody of their kids. Like, think about the reality of that. Now, it's compulsion, it's moral compulsion, and you're not going to be able to separate at some point, or to be separate at some point, while still being in the midst of this great behemoth of a system. So that's just the reality of it. But the solution, of course, is that you find ways in the here and now to organize, to get yourself economically ready. And I also believe that there's a real call for many people, not saying all people, but there's a call for many people to try to find yourself amongst your people. Try to not find yourself living inside of a system that's ran by your oppressor. Try to find yourself inside of a place where you can connect to community in a real and substantial way. So that's my true thoughts on, you know, whether or not you should go. You know, I personally think, and I have always thought, that we will not have true safety and true security living in Babylon. I don't think there will ever be a day where the United States will not be racist. I don't think there will ever be a day where the prison industrial complex implodes and lets us all free, unless you do it by force. That's a whole nother way to go about it. But I don't think it's going to happen by the will of the powerful entities. I don't think it's ever going to be a safe land unless you make it safe, and you make it safe obviously by tearing down institutions. But I don't think it's going to happen. But I do think that there are places in the world where you can establish that security, establish that community amongst your people, because ultimately that's the safest place to be, amongst y'all's children, amongst your people, where you can actually call out to the Almighty for protection and take proactive steps as far as making sure that you're able to protect yourself, as far as arming yourself, as far as learning to grow your own food, as far as doing substantial things to be separate. Those are the things that you have to think about, I believe. Now, as I said, I'm going to start taking proactive steps. So I've been taking proactive steps, but I'm going to start trying to document more of them. I did like a small one when I showed you all, you know, this is medicine that you can make your own medicine, very easy. I did that with one video, but I do think that we can see, it's important to see that some things you can do in the here and now, and some things that might take longer, but if you continue with the work of educating yourself and working hard, you can get closer to that. And so with next week, the plan is that we can start talking about how to start homesteads. That is a very important thing for African people. That's something that I am working on with my husband to be able to do for our children, for our community, and be a blessing to our community. So that is something that we're going to start talking about in concrete terms. And of course, we're still going to continue to understand the whole philosophy of being inside of that position where you are separate, the whole philosophy of being off-grid, for example. So these are a number of things we're going to start covering. I hope that was enough to give you something to think about, something to contemplate, something to maybe motivate you to do your research and educate yourself so that you can separate from the system. But as far as whether it's going to be safe in Babylon, I don't think so. I do think you would be smart to make proactive steps to leave Babylon. And at the very least, do not be in the midst of the worst of the worst. Do not be in a place where the government comes down hard on you, because that's going to be very hard to resist in the near future. With that, I hope that was helpful and fruitful. I will certainly keep the conversation going, and I hope you do too. But I will see you all, God willing, Yah willing, in the next video.
And not even the dog that peace against the wall of Babylon shall escape this judgment. For I know what. I know that all of you youth shall witness the day that Babylon shall fall.
Did you know that the prophetic dream that Nebuchadnezzar had in Daniel chapter 2 could have potential implications for us today? The dream featured a huge statue of a man whose splendor was excellent and its form was awesome. And the head of the statue was of gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. Each section represented a kingdom, and the head of gold was one of those kingdoms of Babylon, ruled by Nebuchadnezzar himself. The second section, the chest and arms of silver, was to be a second inferior kingdom, which we are told in Daniel 5 was the Medo-Persian Empire. The third kingdom, the belly and thighs of bronze, was Greece, ruled by Alexander the Great. And the fourth kingdom, the legs of iron, was undoubtedly Rome. The fifth kingdom, however, is the feet of iron and clay, and that is the kingdom that will be smashed by the rock, bringing down all the other kingdoms before it. Daniel 2:34.
Well, Babylon always promises the same thing, whatever iteration she takes. Of course, if you're in 96 AD, that's Rome. If you're in, and here goes back to wonky or janky interpretations of Revelation. If you've got a bad lens by which you approach the book, then the United States is city on a hill that's about, but if you're reading it honestly, right, this isn't some reference to Russia or China, like this is about us. Like the US is just as much Babylon.
I often hear comparisons of the USA with Rome, and that the United States of America are the new Rome, decadent, old, corrupt, decayed, like the Western Roman Empire in the end stages of its existence. But is that true? 1. Social inequality. A feature that the United States shares with the late Roman Empire is a very large gap between rich and poor. 2. Bread and games, panem et circenses. The ancient Romans had the gladiatorial games, where famously the gladiators would combat against each other or against wild beasts to the death. Now you might think that modern Americans don't have an equivalent, but where indeed people are not killed for sports anymore, brutal fighting sports are still quite widespread. 3. Poverty. After the crisis of the 3rd century, but especially in the last decades of the Western Roman Empire, more and more people of the Imperium were poor and had to live on the lowest of the existence scale. Beggars, homelessness, and other forms of poverty became more widespread as the old glory days of the empire had slowly faded. Compare this to modern-day American cities such as Los Angeles and San Francisco, where homelessness is rampant. Thousands upon thousands of people live in the most appalling conditions, where even third world countries are having a hard time replicating this. And quite bizarrely, this all takes place with a backdrop of technological splendor, skyscrapers, and the lofty homes of the rich. 4. Decay. I quite often already talked about the state of the city of Rome in the late 5th and early 6th centuries AD. The glory days were over and Rome had to endure 3 brutal sacks in the 5th century. The population had dropped dramatically and many parts of the city would now slowly start to fall into decay. American cities such as Detroit, Philadelphia, and many others. There is widespread decay and many parts of these cities fall into disrepair, while only some parts are being maintained and look nice. Especially outlying regions or poor areas are left to decay and fall completely into ruin. 5. Constant wars. The late Roman Empire found itself entrenched in constant warfare. From the crisis of the 3rd century to the last years of the Western Roman Empire and later continuing in the Eastern Roman Empire, there was almost constant warfare. The United States, after being established only 246 years ago as of release of this video, also found itself entrenched in constant warfare. War of Independence, war against the British, war against Mexico, war against the Native American population, then a great civil war, then war against the Spanish, then World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq first time, Afghanistan, Iraq second time. If you would add up the duration of all of these wars, it would be around 150 years, more than half of the existence of that nation. 6. Social polarization. In the late Roman Empire, one would think that the Romans would have united against the barbarian invaders, but nay, they were busy fighting each other in endless civil wars and also fighting each other in everyday life, especially Christians versus pagans. They both blamed each other for the barbarian invasions, and there was massive social polarization in the last decades of the Western Roman Empire. We can witness something very similar in the current US, where there is growing polarization, not only with regard to its two largest parties that drift apart from the center more and more, but also among the general population, where an outright culture war is going on.